Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we bring you day 518 of Russian invasion into Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Olexiy Arestovych, and Russian opposition politician, lawyer, blogger Mark Feygin. Special thanks go to Bill S. for his amazing continuous support of our work. Thank you. And with that, let's dive into day 518. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. It is Wednesday, July 26th. Time is 11 p.m. in Kiev, same time in Moscow. We're doing a usual stream on our channel, day 518 with Olexiy Arestovych. 50,000 are starting with us. Over 15,000 did click the like button. My usual ask, as always. We are facing another technical attack campaign. Putinoids find ways to try to attack us and remove us from the media field, but of course we persist, so your aid to help us go through that can be real simple. Just click the like button. If you can share it, and do not forget to click the bell so you get the ping about our new releases and help us to get to new eyeballs and others who have not subscribed. Do not forget to also join Alexei's channel and Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English. Alright, let's start. Today the main topic is what's happening in Niger in relation to Russia-Africa summit, where 17 countries out of 55 countries in Africa are present, and it happened so that today the president of Niger is either being removed or locked down by his military and by the military leaders of that country. And that kind of has very interesting tones with what Prigozhin was doing with his mutiny. And yeah, that president of Niger didn't make it to that summit in Moscow. So I would say that Russia has already made a choice. They made Africa their choice. Soviet Union did pick up Latin America. Africa was always more flaky in this regard as ideological partners. So Russia somehow still picked Africa. They decided it's closer and dearer to them. When, back in USSR times, Nicaragua and all these South American communists and their fiery fights against other regimes and governments and American influence. So that was somewhat a good card for the Soviet Union, but now Russia has moved all their attention to Africa instead. And, it's interesting. We recently Russia signed a treaty for space exploration with Zimbabwe. Back when I was growing up in Soviet Union, there would be some pushback on that. You do not do that with countries that have no relation to space, really. It's kind of weird. But Putin's regime doesn't care. They sign with everybody. Well, Mark, let me say that Africa is not turning back to Russia, or Russia is not turning back to Africa. They have never really turned away from each other. Back in the 90s and in the Soviet Union, there were a lot of engineers in Africa who studied in the Soviet Union, who learned Russian language, who got their education up in Russia, and Soviet Union back then. And countries like Angola and others, they have a strong influence of Russian culture and Russian connections on them. China and Turkey, they have a huge influence on all the African continent, but there are some kinds of jobs that they would not do, that they do not want to do. While Russia steps here with PMC Wagner and says, hey, we can do that service for you. And that helped them to take space of where French and other influence was before. In countries like Sudan, Central African, Republic. And frankly, Mark, even signing what you call meaningless agreements about space with African countries, it still does achieve certain goals for Russia. Because what they do, they get extra votes in the international organizations. For example, with the United Nations voting. At the beginning of war, I don't remember exact numbers, but I think there were about 28 African countries that called to stop this war and put some pressure on Russia initially, saying that this war shouldn't be there. But then, about half a year into the war, with Russia running to Africa and working with them, only 18 countries voted against this war, and the rest were abstaining or taking no vote. So that's what they're doing. They're visiting difficult territories, like some enclaves on territory of South African Republic, and they're still visiting them because each of these countries, regardless of their size, it's one vote, right? It's United States one vote. One of the African countries is one vote in United Nations. So they're doing that. That's their scope. Another angle is that it is sad to see Russia going down to sign these space accords with countries that really do not have a space program, and then play it out like, hey, we are developing ourselves, getting new partners, when it's just a veneer. That is a sad part for Russians to see where their country degraded, but they have objectives. Okay, Olexiy, you think I also heard that here in the news that the West is really affecting a bunch of African countries, so not all of them came to Moscow summit. Only 17 did, and the rest said no. What do you think about that? Well, Africa in general is much more dependent on the West than Russia. The West is integrated with money and other influence in their economy. Russia can only maybe forgive some of the debts, maybe provide Wagner troops for some dirty missions, but that's about it, really. And frankly, many African countries are very highly developed, so they don't need that level of aid that Russia can give, and they're not interested. But of course, there are other countries who do take that what Russia offers. And if we compare some cultural and economical development in countries, you can look at Cameroon, for example, or Nigeria. They have a lot of both cultural and economic, and even if you look at the Nobel Prize winners coming from these countries, they're big numbers. So, Russia very comparable with what Russia has. So it's on the cultural and economic levels. It's Russia is definitely not standing out from the numbers. The other low bottom that Russia is hitting through is that they are now connecting actively with North Korea, and that's a whole other story. All right. Let's to hell with that summit. Let's go on to the next topic that deserved a ton of commentary about Ukrainian counteroffensive. American administration had a briefing today where John Kirby, coordinator on strategic communications in the National Security Council of the White House, answering the question of one of the journalists to clarify how they gauge the words of Vladimir Zelensky that counteroffensive is not going as fast as we would want to. Kirby answered that the United States will not take a position on that. We will not be directing this Ukrainian campaign as SOFA generals. The leadership in Kiev needs to be the ones who measure success and compare it with the plan. Yet they do acknowledge that the offensive is unfolding not as quickly or fast as it was, as they would desire. So that's one. And you probably heard about that publication in German Bild that supposedly there is some secret document leaked from Bundeswehr which talks about Ukraine generals making mistakes, that they should not be breaking well-trained personnel into small mobile groups from bigger detachments, and this is what is criticized. So they basically criticize operational tactics, counteroffensive tactics of Ukrainian leadership. And all that contextually kind of is designed to present a sort of hum noise coming from the Western press that counteroffensive is developing slower and there are not good enough results that they were expecting. So, in your opinion, do you think this is some sort of a soundtrack to push Kiev closer to negotiations with Moscow? No, Mark. I think it's more of an attempt to explain the frustration that exists in the world about the slower tempo of Ukrainian counteroffensive. It doesn't quite look like preparation for negotiation push because the accents they're peddling are a little different. As for German generals and specialists, I would love to see them organizing that counteroffensive. Something tells me that their results would have been much worse than what we have right now. And the current condition of Bundeswehr. And I'm suspecting military thought in Bundeswehr is also somewhat mirroring their actual military condition. With all my respect to Germany, which are solid second in support of Ukraine and military arms and technologies and all. But as for different strategies and methods used tactically in Ukraine, well, when was the last time when German army broke the organized defense of their foes? I think it was Kursk operation back in 1943, and they were not noticed to be doing anything remotely relevant since then. I can be talking about for hours about deficiencies that Ukrainian army has, but do we need that? Do we need it now? Well, Olexiy will bring it up to understand the future flow of events, because even with that attack, they also let the Brigadier General Christian Freud's, and he did mention that the parity is about 1-for-1 in terms of personnel and some of the equipment on the front in Ukraine. And I think they let him out to speak after that previous statement by Bundeswehr to soften it a little. And he basically was saying that when the forces are roughly equal, one of them needs to cross minefields, miles of minefields that were created over the last 9 months, and also fortified regions that were built over that time, and they need to have a certain advantage of their forces in localized area in order to break through, and which is difficult. It's a process and it takes time. Stated military leader, military commander to DPA agency. Today, the military operations in Ukraine are carried out throughout the whole front line. In order to break through, they need to concentrate advantage in a certain localized part of the front, and Ukraine is basically poking, prodding, looking by braille for that advantageous position and trying to figure out where that possible location can be. Added that representative. I do agree with that, Olexiy. Well, okay. By braille. Let's address what these experts are saying. I'll check what the last one, what his statement was, and I'll address it next time. I'll see who was talking about it, who is the author of that sentence. But I'll address the previous one about us breaking apart the military detachments. What are the factors that define the size of detachments you would be using or a military commander would be using in a certain operation? Usually by means of control and systems of control, because you always work with the numbers that you can control. That's one. Second, of course, operation and terrain and actions of the enemy. Because these German representatives, when they speak, do they consider that? And at any moment when you aggregate your detachment at full, you become a perfect target with all the numbers of drones and observation elements in the air. They become a perfect target for Russian artillery. And they're risking to become just as sitting ducks as Russian columns were near Kiev at the beginning of this war. And then you can also ask another question. were the tactical level control systems that one can use on the battlefront to manage their troops more effectively on the level of a platoon, for example. And how do you solve the problem of 20 kilometers of minefields that are actually protected by artillery and Lancets, UAVs, anti-tank weaponry, and all that? How to clear these mines and go forward? Are they willing to talk about that? Perhaps throw some of the bright ideas. So our military colleagues are generally great, of course, but whenever they come out with these statements, I would suggest them come here and show us how it should be done, if they have a better idea. Okay, I think, yeah, it was more rhetorical, right? Let's take a look at the map. Perhaps let's take a look at Kremenная Svatova area. No, Mark, let's start with our president making a statement about good results on the front. We're lucky this way. Like 10 minutes before we go on air, he comes out and makes a statement that our results on the front are good. He did not clarify, though, which areas we should be looking at, but I think we can correlate that statement with some information from the Russian side where they scream bloody murder. And I would say there was recently interesting exchange happening between Ukrainian command and deep state about 3 settlements that Ukraine did defend, 3 settlements or it did not. Deep state highlighted them on the map that Russia did take them, and then Ukraine pushed back and said, no, that didn't happen. So there was an interesting exchange. But you can see there is a protrusion on one of the maps where Russian forces were trying to get. It's right in the middle. There are 2 red arrows going to the left. That's where they tried to push through, and that process was stabilized by Ukrainian forces. We stopped them there, and we actually even managed to push them back in a couple of places and go into some counteroffensive actions. So the fighting is going. It's heavy. It's difficult. But in the last 24 hours, we managed to stabilize the front and even turn them back a bit. Now, a lot of activity is happening in Srebranskaya forestry, which is a bit to the south from here, Torskaya, Dibrova. This is not surprising. That's the area of interest. They also looking at Belagorovka down near Seversky Donets. You can see our green protrusion. They're still trying to attack that, and 3 arrows pointing at that from the bottom at about 3 o'clock on this map, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And also good news coming from Klishevka, Kurdyumovka, Andreevka. That's on the borders of what Russia was hoping to have a strong fortress near Andreevka. So you can see these 6 diamonds in the middle of the map, 6 red diamonds. Yep, right here where the information is popping up. So they are very nervous because all measures they've taken failed to stop our advance. And even the fact that they thought it's a fortified region, fortified area there, it doesn't seem to slow our troops much. And if or when we push further and progress beyond these settlements, Bakhmut will then be under definite control and will be in a difficult situation. The surroundings of Bakhmut, I should say. Also, here in the middle and the south, in Zaporozhye region, I, again, can rely on rumors and other commentary and videos posted in the last 24 hours that we are moving there, things are progressing, and there is a good progress here and also good progress near Rabotina, down further to the west. Yep, here it is. But since there is no official release, we can only nod at certain things happening and wait till Deep State colors that and Ukraine military command comes out and says that, yeah, we've done it. And also do not forget an important perch near Antonov Bridge that we're still holding. And the enemy, despite all the measures they're trying to, cannot push us out. Alright, so that's it. Yeah, tomorrow we'll probably learn about all the details of things happening, and on Saturday we should be able to discuss that in more depth. I would say, in general, situation is that Russian defense line is being worn out, because for the third day in a row we're getting news about progress, and capturing capturing their positions, liberating our land. That goes for 3 days already, and there was a lull before that. There was a pause, so it tells me that at some point that means we kind of overridden their will to resist, and we're starting to push further. And it may mean also that there've been some tactical decisions, but this is happening throughout the whole front, basically. And we also managed to stop their attacks up in the north on Svatova direction. So I'm generally optimistic. These are good news from the front. And of course, they did shell again 12 missile carriers, sent about 36 or 34 missiles at Ukraine. All of them were downed. Then they also launched Kinzhal, and they were shooting at Starokonstantinov, an old airfield since the Soviet times. It's in the Khmelnytskyi region. Right. It's not a secret even, that sometimes Su-24 is the ones that are shooting storm shadows at Russian positions. So they tried to disable that airfield. And by the way, speaking of storm shadows, yeah, our guys are very accurate. You've seen the warehouses exploding in the last week. There have been a number of significant warehouses blown to smithereens and during the last 7 days. But the Kinzhals they launched at that airfield supposedly did not reach their goal, and we even heard some notes that they were shot down. The Kinzhals were intercepted, which is surprising. We used to be able to shoot them down just near Kiev, but it's interesting. If we indeed shot them down, then we have new military capabilities, not just near Kiev, but also in other parts. So give us a day to figure it out. If that indeed is confirmed, then it's a serious development. And yeah, they did, by the way, use new trajectories today for the cruise missiles, but they were launched by their jets, but we managed to shoot all of them down regardless. So, all right, let's go to other news. There was a council, Ukraine-NATO, that we talked about a couple days ago, and that council made a statement that the Russian actions in the Black Sea indeed touch upon the economic interests of Bulgaria, which is a part of NATO Union, and NATO does need to react to do something about that naval blockade that Russia announced in the Black Sea. So if one looks at the map at Bulgaria and their presence on the Black Sea, you can see Bulgaria and Romania all the way down to Istanbul, to Turkey, to the Straits. In general, the ships going from Odessa and Nikolaev, they can go to these ports, right? That's trade, that's official trade routes. Well, okay, so why did they shoot Belgorod Bridge there in that region? Because that's a railroad line. They basically are trying to preclude the situation where NATO ports will be used in transporting certain things, so like grain, and they want to create a situation where the NATO ports cannot be used to transport grain, so they're disrupting our infrastructure to not allow us to get there. And that, together with the ultimatum they posted at the beginning of Naval Blockade, and the precedent of strikes on our infrastructure near the border with Romania, they have not shot that close to the border with NATO. Even when Yavorova polygon training grounds were attacked in the west of Ukraine, there was a longer distance to the border from there than when they tried to destroy some bridges here. NATO cannot not react because Russian plans include blockade of NATO ports. Direct or indirect actions that lead to that. They create situations that lead to blockade of NATO ports. They also do the dangerous maneuvering in the air around NATO assets. And today in the news, it did post that Russia is training their specialists to intercept civilian vessels, that they are doing exercises, how to do that, how to attack them. And that's actually creeping up on NATO interests. That's exactly attacking NATO interests in the area because their vessels are working on their trade routes between themselves, between us, between Turkey. And NATO is talking now about the dangers of escalation of that. And I can laughingly say here, by the way, that, imagine 50 years later when I am an old grandpa, my grandkids would be asking, so what did they do about this war? And I would say, well, we had mighty allies who could have destroyed Russian fleet in 15 minutes. And I can imagine my grandkids asking, oh, grandpa, so indeed your allies interfered and destroyed that scary Russian fleet that was terrorizing everybody? No, I would say they didn't. They were afraid of escalation. They were gathering, they were talking, they were trying to hold their calm and saying that at any cost they need to avoid any crazy escalation, any dangerous escalation. Russian jets are trying to shoot down US drones in Syria again today, and all that mighty NATO alliances are talking about possibility of escalation and dangers of escalation. And then if my grandkids ask me, did they give you maybe one of their scary weapons to fight the Russians? Since they were concerned? No, I would say they didn't, because they were afraid of escalation. Oh, Olexiy, you just brought a different big stick joke in my mind, but that's a dirty one. I'm not talking about it now. So I would say, yeah, one can buy a ticket to Europe and to Washington, for example, and look at the people who are the strongest people in the world militarily, and yet they're afraid of escalations. And that scary escalations that we've been talking about or hearing from them at the 18th month of this war, 17th month, I don't know whether to smile or cry at this point. I keep remembering Churchill, who said that Americans will always make the right decision after having tried all the wrong ones. And I don't want to offend all Americans here, because these decisions belong to a very narrow circle. At the leadership and the general broad sentiment in the society is to support Ukraine, but unfortunately that smaller circle is the one that represents America on the international front. And I would say, yeah, indeed, many Americans, even in political establishment, are very concerned with lack of military support, but unfortunately they're not at the helm at the moment. And yeah. All right, that story. Another one that came today, that in Konstantinovka, Russia used cassette-type, cluster-type munitions, and a child died as a result of that. Does it mean that Moscow is officially using them? Mark, they've been using them since the first day of this war. Well, they are screaming now that they will do a proportional answer. No, Mark, since the beginning of this war, they've been using that. And I think it was in one of the American media, I think Washington Post or somewhere, that they posted a photo of the cluster munitions taken from the front that Russians were using since the beginning of this conflict. There's a pile of them. And yeah, there's another news. They killed a child with these munitions. Yep, yesterday, the day before yesterday, we also had casualties. There were more civilians dying, so unfortunately, that's the reality and tragedy of this war. Unfortunately, it becomes a sort of routine now that people are dying daily and the cities are being shelled daily. And especially if it is close to the front line, and they, I think, use the Smerch tornado type machinery to use cluster munitions at Konstantinovka, and that's where the kid died. All right. And yeah, now let's get to the next news. Ukraine is publishing new stamp. Supposedly, Ukraine is officially recognizing their trace in the first explosion on the bridge. And there were many theories if it is whether it security service or military intel of Ukraine. Now it appears that this operation was carried out by Ukrainian security service, and I think we discussed that once we can, talk today and say that, yeah, we've done this. You can say that in the morning, you can take ownership, and then at the evening you can say, well, not exactly us. Mark, we have an ironclad answer. Defense Forces of Ukraine. This is who done it. But, right, we should not clarify which part. Or not, Ukraine, maybe partisans, it's a hybrid warfare. Russia likes that stuff. So we're mirroring some things. In Moscow, indeed, Moscow was doing that for 8 years. It's our troops, it's not our troops, it's local rebels, and we're just supporting them with money. So I would put it like this, that behind all the big operations, it is Ukraine's security service that is carrying them out. All the noticeable big operations that get to the media. Oh yeah, they do a lot, Mark. They really do a lot of these. Why? Is it because they have good infrastructure? They have tools and measures? They work with Ukrainians that are in Russia? Well, first of all, there is some competition going between different special services. They do compete in their military skill, and each of them has successes and deficiencies. In each of these services, there are very talented, extra talented people who manage to, especially in the Ukraine Security Service, who manage to pull through very difficult operations. And I also heard, Olexiy, that somebody, I think Maluk, answered that we should not be creating Ukrainian Mossad because we already have it. Right, Budanov made a similar statement. And yeah, we do have it, and it's a very successful unit. All right, let's continue. Okay, situation in Belarus is developing. Now we have more information in the public media, especially in the Belarus opposition circles, that Wagner troops are working on some form of recruitment from Belarus detachments, where they either train them or do whatever together. But it is going under the banner of we are aggregating people to move on Poland. And we are trying to be ready for that operation. So, as I would say, there would always be enough fucktards to try to play that card, but apparently they're still doing it. And there are questions in chat here. Some people are coming with questions about a statement by Kartapolov, which he is one of the heads of the committee in the Russian Duma, in Russian legislative body, Congress, basically. I know that area where they're discussing it, and he was basically saying that we are preparing for a big war, and there was a retort to some law being too restrictive or allowing more people to be conscripted. And basically, yeah, he was saying that they're increasing the drafting age from 18 to 30. That window is now 3 years bigger. It used to be 18 to 27. Mark, Shoigu, by the way, is visiting North Korea, right? On the backdrop of that. It's interesting, what is he asking for over there? Also, if you notice, mobilization in Russia, it dropped the word partial that they've been using before. We'll need to double verify that, but that's what I saw recently, that they're not saying partial anymore. And also they are prohibiting to leave the country if you are in a military database of draftees. You are forbidden to leave the country. And also they're forbidding now attorneys to come and protect the rights of recruits and come with them to the military drafting point. So yeah, they're becoming total serfs there, total slaves to the regime. So right, in general, Mark, they're creating conditions for additional mobilization. And one of the signs that indicate towards that is that they're talking about a long war, and they're creating conditions when they want to talk about Russia being ready for a long war to scare their foes and make them think twice about waging this war and maybe go down and negotiate at the table instead. So I'm thinking with all these statements and this action that they're showing us, they're beating their chest, saying that they're so ready to wage this war, and oh yeah, we might even reach to Poland. And in general, they're also increasing the base for recruitment because they have their plans to add 17 new divisions by 2026, which is a hefty plan. As for Wagner's in Belarus, there are quite a few. Some people are writing 3.5, others say 5. Mark, some estimations already said 10,000 today. But so far, it does have a character of information campaign. Kind of a hybrid campaign to attack public opinion in Poland and in Latvia. But on the other hand, these campaigns that are being worked with elements of preparation activities on the local terrain, at any moment they can grow into the actual hybrid operation. And that could have been a bit sad. Poles are reacting to that extremely seriously. Today, Minister of Defense of Lithuania also came out and said that we are not shrugging this off. Lithuania is ready for everything, and they have enough forces that should resist such a scenario. And knowing him personally and knowing Lithuanian military, I think they know and understand what they're doing, and they're gauging that situation as serious enough. And it is serious. Why? Because information maneuvers are done when they can be potentially grown into real activities. Because if it is just information without any actual things happening on the ground, then it's definitely a psyop. But if you also have elements of that on the ground that can at any moment be turned into the actual operation, then as one who is usually trying to prepare for the worst, I would say we should be preparing. And I'm glad that Poles and Lithuanians understand that, because forewarned is prepared. Now, okay, one more thing. Let's talk about Shoigu's visit to North Korea. Obviously, there is an open line that Russia is looking to buy munitions for the artillery that they're running out. On the other hand, some other extreme journalists saying that they might even bring some of North Koreans to fight on the war theater, but nobody believes that. Yeah, that's more of a hoax, I think. But there is some sort of propagandist element in that, because he could have gone there quietly. But they are bringing a lot of light to that. They're producing materials, they're posting it and showing it on the TV, state TV and video. I think they're trying to push that Korean scenario, and they're trying to say, you'll get North Korea, and we are going to do that stylizing thing towards the events in Asia in the previous century. And by the way, Shoigu himself, he is of Tuva descent, so he naturally supports also a lot of Asian elements by his leadership. How do you gauge that? I want to hear statement of China. You think China may resist? Well, because Mark, soon China will be accused that they are maybe not official persons, official leaders, but journalists would be accusing China that they're supplying military aid to Russia through North Korea. And China did come out and say a ton of times before that they're not going to support Russia militarily. And now imagine what happens if we see Korean-marked shells or Chinese-marked shells on the battlefront. That's going to be a big oops. That'll be a big repositioning and consultations on the highest level. Have you changed your politics? Have you changed your line? Because some people are saying now that there might be a hybrid war, that the West, with the hands of Ukraine, and China, with the hands of Russia, will be fighting each other. I would say we're far from that. But I am curious about the official position of China, and official and unofficial. And we'll learn of that soon, and we'll discuss that, of course, here on these streams. You know, talking of China, they removed one of their officials who supposedly had a Chinese lover who was a British spy, and they returned one Tsingan looked like more a progressive liberal type who wanted to do something new, reestablish connections with the West, and Van E was a very obscurantist position, he actually was also he was the leader of the military committee in the Central Communist Party, right? And now he's back to the ministry position. Yeah, that's somewhat a demotion for him, but still, that's the face that takes that now. We'll see where it goes. We understand that China blessed Korea, in general, North Korea, to give certain things, if we know that, if that comes to light, that China indeed blessed North Korea to give Russia military equipment, shells and bullets and all, there'll definitely be a reaction of the top political leaders of the West, because this is big. And we'll see how that develops. We'll see what their official statements would be. All right, dear friends, we've been live for about 42 minutes on that stream. 151,000 were watching us. Today we decided to give you some respite regarding the poll. And by the way, Mark, I have 80,000. So yeah, good numbers. 64,000 clicked the like button, which is not enough. So please, before you turn off, click that button. That helps us to bring new eyeballs and to maintain in recommended listings in YouTube. Do not forget to subscribe to Feygin Live to help us, to Olexiy Arestovych, and if you are listening or watching that in English, to the Privateer station. Make sure those who need to see that, to hear that, they get a chance to. All right, see you on Saturday, 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. on Saturday. Everything will be good. Do not fret. It'll be good. We'll win. Goodbye. See you.